Tony, I'll just start with you. What should we expect next week out of these hearings? Mark Cuban, I think, has rightly described a lot of the issues with trying to regulate these companies. So what responses might we see as this gains momentum?
Yeah, I think you're likely to see bipartisan frustration from lawmakers next week. There are a few things that unite Democrats and Republicans around here, but an opposition, a concern with big tech is certainly one of them. And so at the antitrust hearing held by House lawmakers, they've opened an investigation into companies like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, and they'll look into whether these companies are using their power in such a way that harms rivals and harms consumers. And then with Libra, with Facebook, we'll see a series of hearings exploring the way the company is rolling out its cryptocurrency. And that's coming on the heels of comments from President Trump just last night, raising alarms with the cryptocurrency, suggesting that perhaps it needs banking regulation. And again, there, House Democrats are saying that there should be a moratorium here.
And Ina, I was struck by the fact that you have Fed Chair Jay Powell on the Hill this week in what I thought would be a hot discussion about it, rate cuts and how worthwhile those might be. And there was a little bit of that, but frankly, everyone wanted to talk about Libra with the Fed chair, and rightly so. I mean, this is something that could undermine the authority of the Federal Reserve, and I thought Cuban's points about it being more of an issue overseas were probably right.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of action, if the U.S. sees it as a threat to the dollar, I think, Europe sees it as, again, the big U.S. tech companies taking on even more of their economy. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot of interest in what Facebook is doing, even though Facebook has said this is a coalition. Eventually, they're going to share some of the management responsibilities with other partners.
Are you surprised, Ina, at how much blowback there has been to this Libra coin, if you want to call it that? I mean, it does seem to be a way for everybody to stand up and say, no, Facebook, now you've gone too far.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. I think, whether to apply existing regulations or new regulations to tech has been a big question. But I think everyone that has any criticisms is like, wait a second, do we really want Facebook to have even more power and controlling a currency on top of where we're at? So I think it is a good launching point for the discussion. But obviously, the concerns around Facebook in particular go deeper than just Libra and what it might do in the future.
Sure. Doug, yesterday we spoke, and I'm sure you've heard this argument a million times, about whether big tech companies today are going to go the way of Microsoft in the sense that they kind of have a lost decade in terms of performance while they have all of these antitrust issues sorted out. Do you guys share any of those concerns, or are you still broadly bullish on the sector?
Yeah, I'd say we're still broadly bullish on the big four tech names. The way that we see it is over the next year plus, I think there's a lot of headline risk. There's still the FTC and DOJ investigations. The presidential campaign, none of these companies have very much in terms of friends on either side of the aisle. And you also have the taxation in Europe issue. And so I think there is a chance over the next year plus, we see a lot more in terms of headlines that hurt these companies. But in terms of the long term, they're still great companies, and we don't see any of this regulation challenging how consumers use them.
And even in terms of the headline risk, we have just ridden this wall of worry all the way up. I mean, sometimes when they're having a bad quarter like they were in the fourth quarter, you can say, okay, well, because of this bad headline, they're having a bad day. Facebook has certainly had some of those. But they frankly have completely shaken it all off. I mean, we're not talking about these stocks trading down big time on these headlines at all. They seem to be completely ignoring them almost.
Yeah, less than a month ago, we had this FTC and DOJ news, and the stocks were hit on that day, but we've gained all that back plus more. And I think part of that is a symptom of the market. People want to be involved with winners, and there is an assumption that big tech will continue to be winners in a good economy. But I think it's fair to say that investors are not that concerned about the potential for regulation right now.
What kind of regulation do you think would get to the fundamental, what could terrify investors, which would be anything that suggests it's going to hurt their growth and their ability to grow profits from here on out?
I think there's two types of regulations, leaving the Libra question aside, maybe three if you count that. I think, one area is privacy legislation. There had been some thought earlier in the year, and there may still be a chance of federal privacy legislation, in particular because there's a California law coming on. Haven't seen as much progress. I think perhaps lawmakers waiting to see if California's law gets watered down ahead of going into effect in 2020. So privacy legislation, what that might do is make it less profitable to be Facebook or Google serving up these ads. And then the other is antitrust, although, investors could look at that either way. I mean, they might see antitrust talk of breakup as, an opportunity to unlock value. Tech actually, investors don't always mind breaking things up. But I do think there are concerns about regulation. But I think, again, as Tony pointed out, that would imply Democrats and Republicans working together on anything, which doesn't happen that often in this city.